Morning guys, welcome back to another number sense tips and tricks video. Today's lesson is going to be over 1.28, which is the squares ending in 5 trick. Before we get started, an important thing to know about the number sense test is that not all questions are created equal. In a previous video, we talked about the pacing needed to score a perfect 200. The pacing needed was 15 seconds per problem. When I say that, I don't mean that you're going to literally spend 15 seconds per problem. Not all questions are created equal. There are some questions that are going to take you roughly 20 to 30 seconds to be able to solve them, and that's solving them relatively quickly. Test writers do this intentionally because they also throw other tricks in there that might even take 10 seconds or less, maybe even 5 seconds or less if you know them well enough. I love today's lesson because when I see problems that involve today's lesson on a number sense test, I get really happy because if you know the trick of today's lesson well enough, these problems can literally take you anywhere from 5, even as low as 3 seconds if you're able to analyze the trick and recognize it immediately. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Today's number sense trick is specifically for numbers ending in 5 and when we're squaring them. I'll hop over to my board here. These are two numbers that you guys should recognize right off the bat. All my returners should have these two squares memorized. A good rule of thumb, and you guys will learn this later on if you're new, a good rule of thumb when it comes to memorization is to memorize all of your squares from 1 to 25. So if you've done this long enough, you might know as a returner that 15 squared is 225, 25 squared is 625. That's raw memorization. We'll get to that later. Today's lesson is not memorization, but it's a very helpful trick whenever you're trying to square any number that ends in 5. This trick has a very simple approach. Any time that you square a number ending in 5, and you'll even notice it up here, it will always end in 25, every single time. If you're curious to know why that is on a deeper level, one thing I would recommend is changing a problem like 25 squared to 20 plus 5 times 20 plus 5 and foiling it and seeing why exactly certain numbers add up the way they do to get to 25. If you do that enough, you'll end up seeing a pattern to understand why these numbers squared will always end in 25. That's the first part of the trick right there. 25 is a write down. I'm going to cross that out because we no longer need the 5. The second part is, here's the easy part, take this number and add 1 to it and multiply it by this original number. So what I mean by that is this. If my original number is 4, I'm going to do 4 times the number that is 1 greater than it, which is 5. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 is your write down, and you're done. So as you begin to try to do some of these problems quicker, let's say you see 55 squared on a number sense test. You think to yourself, oh, okay, this number ends in 5. 25 is a write down. And then I immediately try to think of the two numbers that are going to multiply together. 5 is one of those numbers. 6 is the other number because it's one greater than it. 5 times 6 is 30. 3025 is my answer. So as we continue further, take a look at the next two, 65 squared and 75 squared. If you get good enough at this trick, this gets really, really fast because you know 25 is a write down. 6 times 7 is 42. 25 is a write down. 7 times 8 is 56. If you're really good at your multiplication tables, you will excel at this trick. And if you can recognize this right off the bat on a number sense test and you're really good at your multiplication tables, being able to solve a problem in roughly 5 seconds is tremendous when it comes to pacing because you give yourself 10 seconds to work toward another problem. So that's the basic approach. I want to flip to a few problems on Bryant Heath because, Bryant, he understands that this trick isn't too difficult. So these are some of the harder problems that you might see on a number sense test that use the exact same trick that we just learned. For example, take a look at number 1, 25% of 25. Something that I said in a previous lesson was decimal places do not matter until it is actually time for you to get your answer. So we can say that 25% of this number is the exact same thing as multiplying 25 by 0.25. So all you're going to do is square 25, do 25 times 25. You can do this through memorization because it's slow enough. It's 625. Or the same trick that we still talked about just works the same way. 2 times 3 is 6, so you still get that digit regardless. But the only difference is you're not doing 25 times 25, you're doing 0.25 times 25. So because you move the decimal place over 2 places to the left, you're going to do the same thing here, move this decimal over 2 places to the left, and get 6.25 as your answer. So recognizing when to use the trick is extremely important. Take a look at number 2, 0.35 times 3.5. We're squaring the same number. 3 times 4 is 12. It ends in 25. And now you just have to make sure to realize how many places do you need to move this decimal place over. Well, this moved over 1 time. This moved over 2 times. I need to move the decimal over 3 total places to get my answer of 1.225. Now, one thing that I like about this lesson is that test writers will commonly put multiple tricks inside of one problem. Take a look at number 4, 115 squared. See if you can recognize the additional trick that's needed to solve this problem, and try to give number 4 a shot. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, if you gave it a shot, 115 squared is, it ends in 25, we know that much. And to solve this, you have to do 11 times the number that follows it, which is 11 times 12. So if you've been paying attention, you'll realize we need to use the 11s trick here. The first digit is a 1, the last digit is a 2, and the digit in the middle is these two numbers added together. So our answer is 13,225. The last one that I'd like to show you guys is number 7. I love this problem because it's an estimation problem, which means you have to work certain numbers around in your favor to be able to solve. What do you think would be the best approach to solve number 7? Think about it. Okay, so the approach to this problem goes as follows. I'm looking for the closest answer within 5% of 12 to the power of 4. If you're familiar with your exponents, you should know that 12 to the power of 4 is the same exact thing as 12 squared times 12 squared. Now, why is this helpful? Well, 12 squared is 144 times 144. But wait a minute, we have the luxury of changing certain numbers around just a little bit as long as we stay in the threshold. So it's for that reason I'm going to change 144 squared to 145 squared. Now that this number ends in a 5, this should be a relatively quick solve. Pause the video and see if you can get it in 30 seconds or less. Okay, so my approach to this problem goes as follows. It ends in a 5. It has to end in 25. In my head, I'm going to do 14 times 15. Now 14 times 15 is rough multiplication in your head, so I'm going to use a trick that we learned in lessons past, which is the double and half trick. I notice that this number ends in 5, so I'm going to double it to make it end in 0. That's easy multiplication. And if I double this number, I have to cut this number in half. So now that I know that, all I have to do is 7 times 3. 7 times 3 is 21. Add a 0 to the end. My answer should be 21,025. Thank you guys again for taking this time to watch the video. I hope that you guys learned something. Go ahead and give this problem set a try. Do your best, and as always, go Cats.